because I haven't done one before. So here we are. No idea how many people will show, and that's okay. That's fine. But had a couple things wanted to talk about. I've been slacking the last couple days. Haven't posted a video in about 4 or 5 days. So wanted to hammer a couple topics and get rolling. So first, as far as Detroit Lions fans, one of the biggest things that is being talked about right now is just the coaching staff is being rated. As we all know, at this point, Ben Johnson is now taking the head coaching job with the Bears. Aaron Glenn has now taken the head coaching job with the Jets. We've had multiple other Antoine Randall L, I believe, has gone with Ben Johnson, and multiple other coaches have left our staff. I think it's about five in total. So it's been interesting, but I think for Lions fans, one of the things we have to understand is when a team shows a history of success, and I would say the Lions, certainly the last 2 years, but even 3 years ago when we were 9-8 and almost made the playoffs, we've shown a history of success. And with that comes, other organizations want to try to poach your coaches with the thoughts and the hopes that we can get some of the culture, you know, jumping from Detroit to now, our organization, whether it's the Bears or the Jets. So this is really no difference. I mean, you look at San Francisco 49ers, right? They had, I think, two or three different defensive coordinators get hired as head coaches. You had Robert Saleh went to the Jets. You had D'Amico Ryans went to Houston. And this is just kind of part of the gig. I mean, to a different degree, but even college football, in Nick Saban's last 5 years, call it. I mean, he had, Bill O'Brien had left and gotten I think he went back to the NFL as an OC, but you had Lane Kiffin who went to, at that time, I think it was FAU to be a head coach. You had Steve Sarkisian who left as the OC at Alabama and went to Texas to be a head coach. Like, this is just kind of what happens. And it's something that's really going to challenge, Dan Campbell and in his now head coaching spot, that this is something he's never really had to deal with. I mean, the only thing we had was, we had to fire Anthony Lynn, but that was someone who was fired versus someone getting promoted. So I think it will be a challenge for Dan to fill these positions with guys who fit. And I think at this point, I mean, there's no way to know once you hire a guy until next season and you start to see what his unit produces on the field. So until then, you won't really know. Just within the last, I think yesterday it might have been, there's been reports we've seen reports on both sides that, Kelvin Shepard, who was our linebackers coach, has been promoted to defensive coordinator. I've also seen some Lions insiders say that it's not official. It hasn't been, that he's not officially the defensive coordinator, but I would imagine Dan's probably leaning that way towards, hiring him. I think it's more comfortable to have someone in-house as far as hiring goes. And that's understandable because it's someone, how they operate, how they work, the ins and outs, how they coach up at least their unit as far as the linebackers go. So I do understand that aspect of going with Shepard on the defensive side. I actually think the defense is going to be better next year, solely for the reason that we're going to be healthy. I mean, this season was just a nightmare when it comes to injuries, and the Lions were able to withstand it for a decent amount of time. I mean, we're 15-2. I mean, we lost 2 games the whole season. One of them was pre-Hutch injury. The other was post-Hutch injury. But it was just too much. You look at, Hutch alone was a massive, massive injury for our team because he was the guy, the pass rush guy, the only one who really had any real production outside of Aleem McNeil was Hutch. So when you talk about that guy going down, it was unreal. I mean, we had, I think, it was about 4 or 5 weeks after his injury, he was still like top five, top six in sacks and in pressures in the NFL, and hadn't played for extended amount of time. So he was terrific, and not having him was just something that we could not overcome. Um, well, in the grand scheme, couldn't overcome, but it just was a huge loss. I mean, you look at the Chiefs. If Chris Jones went down for half of their season, you look at just different guys. For the Eagles, they have both of Carter and if Jalen Carter was out for the season, it would totally change their defense. So it's one of those things where I think the defense will be better next year because of just key guys being healthy. So I'm not overly concerned when it comes to the defense. Offensively, I think the offensive coordinator is going to be huge for our future and our success. I just saw actually in the last couple days, maybe day or two, Bobby Slowick for the Houston Texans was fired, and my thought is I think that would be a terrific hire for the Detroit Lions. I think although the quarterbacks are very, very different, but what he did with a young CJ Stroud as a rookie, I think was huge. This season, they didn't have the same amount of success, but I mean, they were still in the playoffs. CJ Stroud had a pretty solid year. It wasn't as good compared to his rookie year, but still a really solid year. And, if you look at it and just say, well, as far as for Slowick, that, well, he's not, they had a worse year this year versus last year. I would agree with that. But they also lost Tank Dell. Nico Collins was healthy for most of the season. He also missed a couple games. And then Stephon Diggs, who was one of the bigger offseason acquisitions for that team, him and Danielle Hunter, missed a very large, he missed about half the season. So, I would imagine Ben Johnson and our offense would have looked very different if you tell me Amon-Ra St. Brown was down for half the season and Jameson Williams missed a bunch of games. Like you need those pieces to be successful. And I think Bobby Slowick is a good offensive coordinator. And if I were Dan Campbell, I would definitely make that call. Obviously, they'll him and Brad Holmes will get that figured out on who exactly they want. But I would imagine that it would be helpful to have that hire done sooner than later. I mean, it's January 26th. Would love to have that completed by end of I mean by February. I mean Super Bowl at the absolute latest, but the sooner you get that guy hired, the sooner he could start meeting with Jared Goff and talking and learning how each of them like to operate, and finding a common ground of, here are some things that I really like to do, and Jared, here's some things that you really like to do. Let's marry the two where we can find a happy medium of, hey, here, we can make it work for both parties, instead of just saying, hey, here's my system, this is what you have to run. So that would be my call. I would call Bobby Slowick, see if he can get, see if we can get him here to Detroit, and kind of get rolling that way. There's been a lot of talk with Ben Johnson and his press conference, if you will, with the Chicago Bears. Mainly with obviously Detroit Lions fans, and just calling them all kind of names of, well, you did this and you did that. I'm not quite sure as Lions fans what we expect when it comes to someone leaving our organization to get promoted. Ben Johnson, and I'll say this as within the last 12 months, this seems to be, as far as a head coach of the NFL, like his dream job of what he really wants to do. And with that, the press conference or the things that he says is all going to be tilted towards the future, the Chicago Bears, and him being excited to be there, which it should be. Like what he did with Detroit was terrific, and it's set in stone, and it's not going to change. So I guess my thing would be this: how do you expect Ben Johnson to get up there in front of the Chicago Bears organization, media, all that, and just gloat and talk about how much he loves the Detroit Lions? Like that would be crazy. That would be weird. I would be annoyed if I were a Bears fan if he just sat up there and talked about, the Lions. I don't care about that. Talk about us. Like, talk about how much you wanted this job. Talk about the great things that you see in our organization. Talk about the future that you see with our young quarterback, Caleb Williams. Talk about the weapons, the infrastructure. Like, talk about us, because for the Bears, they haven't had a lot of hope that's come to fruition. They had some hope when they got Caleb and all that good stuff, but even that didn't work out very well. So I just don't understand the frustration from Lions fans. Like, what do you expect him to say? I, yes, I'm going to talk about how excited I am for the future. I'm not going to gloat about my past employer. I mean, think about it for whatever job that you do. If you don't have your dream job, imagine you get your dream job, whatever it is, if it's in sports or tech or business, whatever, you're now in that role with a different company. Are you going to talk about just how great your last company was, or are you going to talk about all of the things that you're excited about with your new company, your new position? You're now the GM of whatever, the Texans. Aren't you going to talk about how excited you are with the Texans versus, oh man, I love my time in Detroit. I actually wish I could be there now. No, that would be extremely weird. So I really don't get all of the fuss about Ben Johnson, his press conference. He's gone. He's gone. He was terrific. Love him. But he is now gone. So it's time for the Lions to move on. Ben Johnson, he can move on, and he's going to, hopefully do good things for the Bears, but not too good, because they're still in our division and we want to win it. So let's move on. So I want to talk about the college football playoff. A couple things with it. So number one, first and foremost, the calendar is very different. I wanted to do a video and just never got around to it about just the feeling around like the national championship. And I'm talking about fans outside of Notre Dame and Ohio State, because I know some Notre Dame and some Ohio State fans. But so for them, I know that they were ecstatic about the game coming up, and I'm sure there's a ton of excitement and all that good stuff. I'm talking about people outside of those two fan bases. I just don't think that there was the juice, the buildup, the typical excitement around the college football national championship, and I'm not 100% sure of why. Part of my thought is I feel like it was a lot of time in between the those quarterfinal games and then the semifinal games and then the national championship, but it actually wasn't that long. I think it's about 8 days, which I believe is about the norm. It just felt like a really long time. And I'm someone who loves college football, so I am not someone who gets burned out. Like I've heard people say that oh well, fans are getting burned out. I don't think that's the case. But I also don't know what the reason was. I listened to on YouTube Josh Pate, who's used to be Late Kick. I think it's a college football show or something like that. But he's terrific. But he had mentioned that ESPN has the exclusive rights to the national championship, and that the other networks aren't going to promote it, because the other networks like ABC, CBS, etc., they don't have any type of viewership. Like, it doesn't benefit them to promote the national championship. So he had mentioned he thought that was part of the reason why, and that with the NFL, it's a little bit different because there's multiple partnerships with multiple different companies. So there, ESPN or Hulu, or not Hulu, but Prime, Netflix. Like, there's different networks and companies that are involved with the playoffs. Where right, so like Netflix had a game. I think they had a playoff game, but I know they had a Christmas game. But like multiple different. So ESPN has a game, ABC has a game, CBS has a game. So all of those companies, it benefits them to talk about the playoffs and to promote the playoffs, NFL playoffs I'm talking. So I think that makes perfect sense. So that if you're not consistently consuming like ESPN, then you may not see the ads or the promotions at all. And it's kind of odd because Notre Dame and Ohio State are two of the biggest brands in college football, traditional powerhouses. Like, I mean, literally any and everything you could want with a college football matchup, both of these teams had it. They had the history, the tradition, big names. I mean, they had everything, and it just seemed it was just odd. Um, so with the college football playoff, the viewership was down. It wasn't typical as far as a national championship goes, and there's been like some discussions and reportedly uh, there's been some talks between college football and the NFL that the NFL may be flexible when it comes to the national championship to just not have, because basically the national championship is going to have to battle with the NFL playoffs, and the NFL playoffs, the NFL in general, is just a monster when it comes to ratings. It doesn't matter where it is. It can be on Peacock, it can be on Netflix, it can be on ESPN. It is going to get ratings because that's how the NFL is. And it says that the NFL is excited to work with college football or something to that tune. I don't think the NFL is going to move a muscle when it comes to trying to help college football, because in the grand scheme, this isn't affecting the NFL's product at all. This isn't going to affect the marketability of the players in college football, because the NFL has, I mean, this is a golden business model. So the NFL doesn't put any money, any dollars, any funds towards college football. College football is its own entity, very popular, and the benefit of college football being as popular as it is all of these players like Caleb Downs, Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, so on and so forth. They all have a ton of popularity to the point that there's millions of people that are going to the NFL draft to watch these players getting selected by their teams. So the NFL doesn't have to put a dollar towards anything before that. The marketability, they market the draft, of course, but they don't have to do anything there. Then when it comes to the so college football, so even if, let's say, the viewership stays the same next year, right? It doesn't mean that the players are any less marketable when it comes to them going to the NFL. So what do I care? I'm not here to work around your schedule, and I get it. They're not obviously going to say it that way, but that's kind of how I would approach it. Well, that's what I think the NFL will do. I don't think they're going to do anything because there's no negative effect for the NFL. Our numbers are still really good. We've got the divisional round, wild card weekend is terrific. I could do without the Monday game, but is what it is. I would prefer 3-3, 3 on Saturday, 3 on Sunday would be terrific. I would love that. But I'm also someone who likes to go to bed relatively early. So I just I don't see the NFL doing anything. Like, why would they? There's no, they don't feel any negative effects. Do you think, I mean, if anything, what I I don't see it. Because I was gonna say maybe with because they are partnered with like ESPN, but they're partnered with all of these companies. They're partnered with Amazon now. So partnered with Netflix. So it's not as if if ESPN is like, oh man, we're hurting, blah blah blah, like scratch our back, we'll scratch yours. Like, dude, I got 6 other companies that are scratching my back. I don't really need, this means nothing to me. So I'm not sure what's going to happen. My guess would be the NFL is not going to change anything. I think college football could do themselves some favors. I think number one would be, well, let's shift gears. So as far as some changes, and these are just my thoughts. I is what it is. I have no idea if college football is looking to make any changes or not. But one of the changes that I would make is the week after championship weekend. So there's the conference championships that are on Saturday, and then that next week there are no college football playoff games. There are some bowl games, but as far as playoff games, there are none. Um, what I would do is I would start the first round sooner because now you've got conference championships, and then 2 weeks later, the first round, the games are being played. I would play those first games that very next week, so there wouldn't be that week layoff for the playoff games. I would do it right away. So that would be the first one that I would do. The next change that I would do would be the first round of the playoffs would be the bowl games. I'm sorry, not the bowl games, at the neutral sites. I'm losing my mind. I'm trying to do like two things at once very poorly. So what I would do is the first thing would be the first round playoff games instead of the so instead of the first round being the home playoff games, right? When it's 5 through was it 5, 6, 7, 8 are all get the home games. That first round would be neutral site games, and I would make the second round, so 1 through 4 would get a home game, because I think that is pretty crazy, pretty ridiculous that the essentially the 8 seed gets a home playoff game, but the number 1 seed in the country does not get a home playoff game. Like, that seems silly to me. So that would be a change that I would make. So I would pull the calendar forward just a bit, and then there would be a home game. So for this year, who was it? Oregon, who's at Boise State, whatever the top 4 seeds were, they would all get a home game, because I just think that is wild that you can be the 8 seed and you get a home game versus the number 1 seed in the country. Like, that's the whole point of being the number 1 seed, is that you get the advantages. So that would be my thought on it, is pull the calendar forward, and then also the second round would be the home games. So who knows? We'll see. Maybe they'll make some changes and figure some things out. But those would be a couple things that I would take a look at and see what they're going to do. Pete Carroll is now the head coach of the Raiders. So I actually did a video about the Raiders and what I would do if I were the GM, which I am not. Of just different quarterbacks that I would go for. Justin Fields is an option. I don't think I said Kirk Cousins, but Justin Fields would be one. I think Kirk Cousins was in there. And then if those failed, then I would actually go all in for Sam Darnold. Reason being, I just think that the Raiders have a ton of cap space, and you're just not going to do anything without a quarterback, even if it's just a B-level quarterback. I mean, you're in a division with Mahomes and Andy Reid, Jim Harbaugh and Justin Herbert, and Sean Payton and Bo Nix, and all those teams made the playoffs last year. So ideally, they're going to be better next year. So it's important to see what is going on and to improve the team. I mean, you've got to do something. You can't expect to, hey, we're just going to do the same. We're just going to just keep on rolling, or just not anything that you can stand pat with. Now, if you want to say that they're just going to like slow build this thing, then okay, I can live with that. But even then, even with the slow build, I would still go for Justin Fields, because I think he'll be pretty cheap. I think he can make some plays with his legs. I think he needs to be unlocked a bit. I felt like with the Steelers, that they basically told him, just, hey man, just don't turn the ball over. Like, be safe, don't turn it over. Where I thought his benefit would have been, number one, taking deep shots down the field, and then using his legs. And he didn't really seem to do that a lot. and he was not very good for them. So that would be my thought on it. But I think it's a really good hire. I was not sure. I've said Peter Carroll. Um, I was under the impression that Carroll was retiring, but he is not, obviously. Um, so I think it's a terrific hire. The Raiders are just a disaster right now. They are an absolute disaster. You've got Max Crosby, which as a Lions fan, hey, I think you should trade him for a 1 and a 2. Actually, 1 and a 3. Don't go crazy. Because I would love to have Max Crosby with the Lions. Him, Hutch, and Z would be unreal as far as a pass rush for us. But I digress. I think he would be a terrific trading piece for the Raiders to get back some draft capital because they are lacking talent in a lot of areas. A lot of areas. So that would be my plan if I were the GM. Pete Carroll may have a different thought on that as a like a defensive guy, I guess. He may want to just, start building up that defense. They've got offensively Brock Bowers, who was amazing this year. Unfortunately, the team was so bad, no one really paid much attention to them. But he was terrific. And they do have, a piece with him. You've got, like I said, Crosby. You're not going to trade Bowers, but you're just not going to do much without a quarterback. And Aiden O'Connell is not a quarterback in the NFL. So they've got to get that piece figured out and kind of build from there. I heard something I've been hearing just shows talk about potentially Pete Carroll and Russ teaming back up. I'm not quite sure I would want to go that route because Russ, it just seems that he's not the greatest for a locker room. Especially a locker room that like really is missing leadership outside of Max Crosby. I don't know. I would want to bring Russ in, and at this point, I mean, he wasn't terrific, wasn't great, and in fairness, Justin Fields wasn't either. But at least Justin Fields has the legs that he can make some plays, and I feel like we're just replaying the argument of the Steelers before the season started of who should start and all that. But that would be my thought is Justin Fields. I would go Justin Fields every day before I went Russ. Russ doesn't have the legs anymore. He seems to just start making poor decisions, especially in crunch time when you need him to play at his best. And like I said, it doesn't sound like he's great for the locker room. So I wouldn't, if I were Pete and really for Pete Carroll, I mean, they shipped Russ out before a lot of people thought they should have. And then he went to Denver and was bad that first year. And then with Sean Payton, the numbers looked pretty good, but he was not playing winning football. And then he goes to the Steelers. So I wouldn't, just for culture, locker room, and he's just not all that effective either. So that would be my thought process there on the Raiders and Russ. And the last thing I want to get into is it's been a lot of talk about the, roughing the passer penalties that have been happening when it comes to Patrick Mahomes. And I think at the end of the day, because I feel like this argument has gone back and forth a lot. But the thing is I think there are bad calls that happen in every NFL game. The Chiefs are one of the biggest brands, if not the biggest brand right now in football. So they're on TV a lot. So you see Chiefs games more than you see Raiders games, for example. Oh, excuse me. Wanted to mute when I burped, but so you see Chiefs games more than any other games. But the thing that I will say is, it seems like Mahomes is getting different calls than other quarterbacks are, and Chiefs defenders and people are, oh my gosh, you guys are whining about this these calls and blah blah blah, so on and so forth, and that it didn't make a difference in the Houston game, and it, that's not the point. The point is we're seeing, it's similar, I think, to the with the James Harden and the whole rip through thing, like manipulating the refs, and that's okay, but do your thing. Like, if it's in the rules, go ahead and manipulate them the best of your ability. Because in football, any edge you can get, you should take it, because that is how it works. Now, I'm not talking about cheating, but just finding an edge over your opponent. Do that. But when the talk is this loud, I think at the end of the day, it's not great for football when there's so many people talking about it and it's such a big talking point. Like, that's just not good for the game. I mean, you see Patrick Mahomes is flopping and, staying in bounds and then ducking down, not really getting hit, and then a flag goes there, but Jared Goff gets, his head taken off and there's no flag there. The point is, we want it to be equal no matter what. So if somebody does the things Patrick Mahomes gets and Mahomes gets a flag, let that same stuff happen with Goff or anyone else. Kirk Cousins, I don't care. Michael Penix. But when it seems to be imbalanced, that's when there's a lot of issues. And Jawaan Taylor was he consistently lines up in an illegal formation consistently. And once again, I do get it that it's manipulating the rules, but the counterpoint to that would be, yeah, but when he is not lined up on the line of scrimmage, you got to throw a flag. And unfortunately, I don't care if you have to throw 4 flags in a row. If he does it every single time, you need to flag him, because that is how the rules are made and built. I mean, we have, little green lines that are going, that they have set and made in the broadcasting team just for the Chiefs, because Jawaan Taylor is consistently lining up in the backfield. So if that's the case, like, we've got to make some changes on that. So, it's just, I've seen Nick Wright and is retweeting Adam Schefter, and like, if that's the case, then now he's bringing up all these other videos and stuff. It's like, it's not really that deep, man. Like, the refs aren't throwing penalties on Taylor, and they're throwing a whole bunch for Mahomes. Like, and if you want to say, well, he got hit head to head, okay, great. But when it happens to other quarterbacks, they need the flags as well. And it's quite that simple. But that is it for me. Appreciate you for tuning in, whether it's live or after the fact. Subscribe. We'll greatly appreciate it. Peace.